Okay, so welcome back. We're talking about the fact that the business logic layer, instead of displaying ridiculous little things to the log, we now actually need to have it do something, which is throwing a new exception. So I'm going to go through here and just make all these changes. I'm going to put the video on pause, but I'm going to go through and make all these changes so each one of these is going to be exactly like the other. Okay, so why don't I need to have a return statement right here after I throw that exception? Because exception handling never returns. So I don't need I don't ever need a return statement afterwards because nothing below that point is going to happen, right? Okay, so each one of the methods now says throw exception for each location where I do that secondary input validation. I'm throwing an exception here, so it appears all those locations, which meant when I got all the way back up here to my employee class, I had to have it throw an exception too, because that guy did, and that guy did, and that guy did. Okay, that kind of sort of makes sense. Let's go back to our guy now and look at this guy. Oops, I have a red squiggly. What's going on? I just told you. I made it the responsibility of the person using the employee class to handle the exceptions. Okay, so that means I have no choice but to go in here and say, try. That is the thing that's causing the exception. And then I say, catch exception EX. And then, I'm going to display it to the screen somewhere, like maybe like a ET display or some other technique. Perhaps we use the other technique we used before on, I don't remember what chapter it was, 13, where we popped up a little alert, but whatever, this will work. So I would just say set text, and then I would just say EX to string. That way, whatever the error message is gets popped up. Okay? So I'm going to grab my guys here. And I'm just going to move him into here. Cool? So now that made that go away. Because this is potentially could throw an exception. Okay, so one more time. Let's talk about what we did and why we did it. I throw an exception in the business logic layer because it is deaf and mute. It can't talk back to the user. The only way it can talk back to the user is through these exceptions. This guy has the ability to use an ET display, right? But this guy does not. He doesn't know anything at all about display. He's just an employee class. He cannot display anything on the screen because he don't even have a screen. So therefore I have to defer. I throw an exception here and defer event handling to the other guy. Okay. All right. So this is the technique I want you to use from now on when you're doing business logic layer stuff. Okay, cool. So from chapter 10 and chapter 11, this would be a dang good example to look at, right? Okay. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to tweak that example on the validate int method from chapter 9 and chapter 12. So let's do that. I'm going to go back to my main activity guide. I'm just going to paste that from that example. Nothing special here. I just, copy and pasted from the example we put together. Obviously, I didn't quite copy and paste enough because I needed the beep guy. But we'll ignore that. So what we're trying to do is right here is where we're converting the string into an integer, okay? But this could fail. It is possible that this could fail. So I need to put that part into a try catch block. The problem is there's more to it than that. And so I'm probably going to take all of this and put it inside a try catch block. And the reason for that is kind of complex. But the way if you remember, there's a thing called structured programming where, you have something happen and then there's only going to be one return statement at the end, which is kind of what we're after here. So that's what I'm going to do here. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to say try. And then go ahead and down here and do my catch block. And I'm going to go ahead and say exception EX. And then I'm going to grab all this guy. and put him inside my try block. Now, I'm pretty much well sure that none of this part is going to actually have any errors, but hey, come on, it's possible. So now we get back to here, and I just copy all this stuff, however I want it to say. This is probably something a little easier. I could probably just use one of these. And so my error message that pops out onto the guy is going to say something like, could not be converted to a number, or something like that. I don't know what you want to say. Could not be converted into a number. That's probably a little silly, but you get the point. Okay, so you see how this thing works? I'm using exception handling in the business logic layer because if something sneaks through, I want it to actually do something. So once again, I'm expecting to see throw statements in the business logic layer that's being handled, by activity main, and I'm expecting activity main to be using try catch blocks to be able to make sure that we don't enter any junk into your text field, that it doesn't blow things up. Got it? Okay. All right. So moving along, on page 435, they talk about using JSON to serialize stuff. And, JSON is an alternative to using parsable or the serializable interfaces. Those two interfaces are really doggone cool. But if you had to do it on your own, you could. And, this is good stuff to know. And do please read that section of the book. But quite frankly, the Json library is probably the way to go, rather than learning the old style JSON stuff. Okay, so that's the end of this chapter, and we'll see you guys again in the next chapter.